Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of July of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And before we start, I would like to make an important announcement. I'm planning to take a short 10-day break. During this time, I'll be making fewer videos. I'll return to my normal schedule after August 6th. So this is the situation. Now let's return back to Ukraine, and first let's talk about another massive missile and drone strike that took place during the previous night between the 25th and 26th of July of 2025. This morning, the sources published this video, this photo, and here we can see the approximate routes of attacks. The Russians, as you can see, attacked the territory of Ukraine with drones, with ballistic missiles, and with cruise missiles. But in comparison with the previous days, we see that the Russians used much less drones in comparison with, let's say, even the latest, the previous attack that took place several days ago. But at the same time, as you can see, according to this photo, the Russians used much more missiles in comparison with previous attacks. First, the sources reported that during the night, the Russians attacked the city of Dnipro and the city of Kharkiv with almost 10 or 13 ballistic missiles. Later, we got report from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and according to them, during the previous night, the Russians used 27 missiles of various types, Iskander K, Iskander M, Ha-5969. So, telling the truth, this is a record. You know that this is not a record of the special military operation, but most likely this is a record of 2025. The Russians used missiles, so many missiles, even more during the first stage of the special military operation in 2022, in 2023, and even in 2024. The Russians used so many missiles, and even more sometimes. The Russians used around 100 missiles just per one attack. But in 2025, the Russians changed their priorities and they began using drones massively. So now we see that the Russians are moving back to their, let's say, first strategy of 2022 and 2023. And as a result of attack, a lot of explosions were recorded, and we have geolocations that confirm the damage the Russians managed to deal. First, let's talk about the settlement of Kamenskaya Kurilovka. The Russians attacked this building. This is a mall. This is just a regular mall that Ukrainians use, let's say, for daily shoppings, for different things, family things, and so on. This mall was attacked during the night, so most likely, the Russians, as a result of, say, reconnaissance operation, intelligence operation, managed to discover that most likely the Ukrainians were using this mall and, let's say, depot of this mall for military purposes. So most likely this is the reason why the Russians attacked this area. So also during the night we got this picture of fire anomalies. As you can see, the mall was destroyed completely, and the Russians destroyed not just the mall but also the territory around. So the mall, the Russians attacked these residential parts, probably some maybe air defense missiles, maybe the Russian drones or missiles as well, and the Russians attacked these facilities. So as you can see, some probably production centers that Ukrainians used to produce drones, or at least used for these purposes, were also destroyed. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians attacked the city of Dnipro. This time the Russians attacked the southern part, the railway station, and the Russians attacked this industrial facility complex. Furthermore, according to this map, as you can see, the Russians attacked the city of Kharkiv. Also, a lot of attacks, a lot of explosions were recorded. So it seems that the Russians are trying to do everything they can with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to bring additional forces, to bring additional weapons and arms to the line of combat contact. It's clear that the Russians attacked the city of Dnipro and the city of Zaporozhye just with one purpose: not to allow the Ukrainians to reinforce their positions in the South Donetsk direction, in the Dnipropetrovsk direction, of course in the area of the city of Pokrovsk and in the area of the city of Konstantinovka. When talking about attacks on the city of Kharkiv, the main purpose of the Russians was not to allow the Ukrainians to reinforce their positions in the area of the city of Kupiansk, where the front line continued collapsing. So now let's discuss in details the situation on the ground, because we had also a lot of changes during the previous 24 hours. And first, let's talk about the Dnipropetrovsk and the South Donetsk directions. As you can see, we have a lot of changes on the ground. Before we start discussing every single icon, first let's compare the map between the dates. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 25th of July of 2025. The Russians answered the village of Zelený, and there were very heavy clashes for the territory. We got several reports that the Russians managed to answer the eastern outskirts of the settlement of Maliivka, and during the previous days we had reports that the Russians began offensive in the direction of Novopavlovka. And today all these updates were confirmed by videos, by different videos published both by pro-Russian resources and by pro-Ukrainian resources. So let's start with the chronology. And first video that took place today, that was published today, was the video that was published by the group of Forces East by their Telegram channel that has connections with them. In this video, the group of Forces East published how exactly the battle for Zelený was taking place. The video was built on the same pattern as we saw the day before yesterday during the previous villages that were captured by the group of Forces East. Here we can see artillery preparation, here we can see aviation strikes, then we can see FPV drone attacks, and then we can see, of course, lots of episodes how Russians raised their Russian flag in different parts of the settlement. During this video, at least 5 or 6 episodes were recorded. The Russians raised their flags in different parts of the city of Zelený, which means that this village was secured by the Russians completely. One of the flags, furthermore, was established to the west of the village on the territory of these farms. So no, we have no doubts that the settlement of Zelený was taken by the Russians completely by the morning, by the way, of the 26th of July of 2025. Most likely there are still several pockets of resistance or Ukrainians that are trying to hide in the basement. So most likely the next days the Russians will secure this territory completely, and after this the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the direction of Andriivka-Klivtsova, one of the villages that remains under complete Ukraine control in the western part of the Dnipro region. Few hours later, the group of Forces East published another video, and this time from the settlement of the village by the name of Maliivka. So this is another video that was built on the same pattern, lots of episodes where we can see how exactly the battle for the village was taking place. And of course, in the final part of this video, we can see lots of episodes how Russians were raising Russian flags and flags of their units in different parts of the settlement. Based on this video, we adjusted the map in this area as well. So as you can see, at least 5 flags were recorded. The flags were recorded in the eastern part and in the central part. We haven't received even a single flag from these facilities, but according to this map that was published by the group of Forces East, this territory also was taken by the Russians under complete control. So, and this is obviously a breakthrough. And now we can say that there are just 4 villages left. We're talking about the village of Grushkovske. The settlement is currently located in the gray zone because there were several reports that the Russians secured this territory. The reports were published by probably neutral mappers. We have the village of Andriivka-Klivtsova. This is the last village in this part. We have the village of Alexandragrad, a bit further in the southern direction. And we have the village by the name of Kamyshovaha. So just 4 villages left, 3 of them under complete Ukraine control, and one of them is considered as a gray zone or contested area. Another important fact that today the Russians, as a result of offensive operations, secured the settlement of Maliivka, this one, and furthermore, this is the second village of the Dnipro region. So the first village that was secured by the Russians on the territory of the Dnipro region was the village of Dachna, and the Russians secured this territory a long time ago, probably months or something like this. By the way, today we got another video from the same direction where we can see how Ukrainians of 46th Brigade were attacking Russian soldiers in these fields that were trying to get as close as possible to the settlement of Novopavlovka. Several episodes were geolocated in these fields, and based on this video published by the Ukrainian side, we made another adjustment. So we are returning back to the villages of Dnipro region. So the first village of Dachna was taken almost months ago, and today the Russians secured the village of Maliivka, which is the second village since the beginning of the special military operation that was taken by the Russians on the territory of the Dnipro region. So So it's still too small. There are thousands of villages in this oblast, but obviously this is a very strong and powerful message to Zelensky that Russia is not going to stop. Russia will move deeper inside of the territory of Ukraine, deeper inside of the territory of Dnipropetrovsk region. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. And during the previous 24 hours, we got lots of very interesting updates, and most of them tell us that the situation for the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk is terrible, basically very near to disaster. So let's discuss what is happening right now in this area. During the previous 24 hours, we adjusted the map in the southern part significantly. So let's compare the map between the dates. This is, for example, the situation by the end of the 25th of July of 2025, and just yesterday, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed that the settlement of Zverevo was taken by the Russians completely. Based on that report, we adjusted the village of Zverevo under complete Russian control. And later, we got reports that the Russians continued their offensive and they managed to improve their position significantly in the southern part of the city. And this morning, on the 26th of July, we got additional changes on the ground that were made by different mappers. Some of them are very reliable, some of them are trustworthy. So let's discuss what's happened. For example, several neutral mappers reported that the village of Leontovichi also the Russians improved their positions there also. Furthermore, the Russians secured fields on the way to the city of Pokrovsk. Several neutral mappers and pro-Russian resources reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians secured the settlements of Novoukrainka, Chunushine, and the Russians secured completely the western and the central part of Novopavlovka. Furthermore, several trustworthy mappers, neutral mappers, reported that the Russians took under control not just the villages along the railways, including the village of Novopavlovka. The Russians secured completely the most southern micro-district of the city of Pokrovsk, and currently there are very heavy clashes are taking place for the first buildings of the Pokrovsk citadel, which is located in the most southern part of the city. And during the previous 24 hours, we also got lots of videos of this type. As you can see, the Russians are bombing and attacking the southern part. Basically, the Russians are reducing to ruins the southern part of the city, and it seems that they are tasked to take this territory under complete control. And now we don't have no doubts that most likely this is going to happen, probably even before the end of this weekend. Furthermore, the sources reported that Ukrainians are disorganized, they have problems with communication, and they don't know the area of responsibilities of the units who are currently located in this area. So we can describe the situation with Ukrainians like chaos and panic and nothing more. So this is the situation. We are waiting for additional updates. Most likely we're going to receive them in coming days and nights. Now let's talk about the southeastern direction. As we discussed in the previous video, this is another area where the Russians are trying to attack the Ukrainians. They're trying to answer the settlement of Mirnograd from the south. And during the previous 24 hours, we just got several videos how the Russians were attacking and bombing Ukrainian positions in the southwestern part. Lots of explosions, lots of attacks were recorded, but as you can see, without changes on the ground. Now let's talk about the northeastern part. As for this territory, we had several videos that confirms Russian pressure on this direction. For example, in this video, we can see how Russians attacked another mine with most likely FAB 1500 or with multiple launch rocket systems, but as you can see, without changes on the ground. The changes are coming just further in the northeastern direction, in the vicinity of the settlements of Zatishak and Zapovednaya. So according to neutral mappers, the Russians secured these territories and took them under complete control during the previous days. So the Russians continue their offensive inside of the Pokrovsk agglomeration itself, and the Russians are trying to improve their positions further in the northern direction operation with the purpose to cut the Ukrainians in cauldron. I would like to remind you that several days ago, Syrskyi stated that Ukrainians still have possibilities to defeat the Russians along the entire line of combat contact, and according to different experts, the Ukrainians are planning to launch a counter-offensive operation in the area of the city of Pokrovsk with the purpose to give the Russians a general battle, which will determine the end of the 2025 and most likely a military campaign of 2025 and most likely the entire special military operation. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours, according to different sources, the Russians secured the village of Alexandra Kalinova. This was reported by different sources and by different mappers, and we have geolocation that confirm complete Russian control over the territory of Yablunovka. But the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation still haven't confirmed anything. As for the eastern flank of the Kliban-Byksky pocket, as you can see, we have a lot of geolocations from the villages of Katerinovka and Kliban-Byk. The Russians established complete control over this territory. We have a lots of videos, a lots of episodes, lots of explosions and attacks were recorded. And it seems, watching this video, that the village of Kliban-Byk and Katerinovka were already reduced to ruins. It seems that the Russians are about to begin their major offensive operation in this area as well. And it seems that the Ukrainians will not hold their lines, will not hold their positions, not just because they can't do this, basically because the Ukrainians have a very huge crisis along the entire line of combat contact, not just there. Now let's talk about the Sivas direction. During the previous 24 hours, we had another massive attack of Russian artillery and aviation all over the entire direction. Lots of explosions and lots of attacks, as you can see, were recorded. Especially we have lots of strikes in the area of Serebryanka and Seversk, the city. So it seems that the Russians are preparing for something. And this is, let's say, normal situation, because during the previous 24 hours we had lots of updates that confirm Russian control over the Serebryanka forest. So during the previous 24 hours we got this video that was published by the Russian resources, and here we can see how Russian soldiers answered almost the central part of the Serebryanka forest and how Russians raised their flags. So we have two episodes. The previous one took place almost in the central part of this area, and this episode took place on the most western part of the changes on map. So this building where the Russians raised their flags was geolocated, and this is exactly the structure that the Russians managed to secure. So based on this video we came to conclusion that the most powerful and the most fortified part of the Serebryanka forest was taken by the Russians, or at least outflanked by the Russians from the south and from the southwest. If this information with the Russian positions here is correct, and this is not something like a media attack where the Russians were tasked just to create a video with flags, this means that Ukrainians most likely in coming hours, not even days, will try to evacuate this pocket further in the western direction. Otherwise they would be caught by the Russians and controlled without any chances for evacuation. So it seems that the front line crumbles along the entire line of combat contact, and the most important that we start following movements and changes on the directions that haven't been changed since the beginning of, or since the end of 2022, and this is the most important and the most loud signal ever. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.